How? Every time.
Hello fellow readers and readresses, I am finally back in the city after what felt like absolutely forever, and it feels good. You know, it feels good to be back in my space with my books, and I am really happy to be hopefully going back to my regular schedule. We'll see. How have you been? I hope you're having a beautiful spring, or fall for that matter. I keep on forgetting about our brothers and sisters below the equator, and if you're from there, I hope you're having a beautiful fall. As in, I hope you're enjoying the autumn, not that you're falling in an aesthetically pleasant way. Whatever, April is over, wrap up time. Spoiler alert, not too many books were read, but from the ones that were read, there was not a single miss, not a one. It's kind of uncanny how amazing all of these books ended up being, but we'll get there. First, as always, let's quickly go through the TBR I was working with. First, we had The Memory Police, which was a prompt cards pick to cover the prompt, read a literary award winner / nominee. Then we had Red Country, which was a series style landing, followed by Shadow and Claw, which was another prompt cards pick to cover the prompt, start a new series. Then we had Ships of Merior, yet another prompt cards pick for the prompt, read a book with an animal on the cover or in the title. Then we had Nemesis Games, yet another prompt cards pick for the prompt, read a book with a prologue, followed by Master of Sorrows, a prompt cards pick to cover the prompt, a book over 300 pages, and the title starts with an M. And the final book was The Hard Way, which was a free choice for completing the map. So a total of 7 books, which is not a huge TBR, especially as compared to previous months, but in actuality it spanned quite a few pages, and some of these books required significant brain power, especially 2 of them, and one in particular almost broke my brain. My God. But before we talk about these books, let's take a minute to honor the casualties. So, in April, I wasn't able to get to a single book from my TBR, and that book is Master of Sorrows by Justin T. Cole. This is a young adult fantasy, I've been told by one of my subscribers, and I really wanted to get to it, but unfortunately, from the beginning, I knew that I wouldn't be able to read everything on the TBR, and I had to prioritize, and unfortunately, this one didn't make the cut because everything else was a little more exciting to me. But I will get to this one day, hopefully soon. And from all the other books that were on the TBR, there is one that I started but wasn't able to finish before the end of April, and that is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. This is an adult dystopian novel, and I'm only about 10 pages into it, so I won't talk about it right now, though from what I've read so far, I'm left with good impressions, and I'm really intrigued, so I hope it continues that way. I will talk more about it in my May wrap-up. Now that all that is out of the way, let's talk about the books that I was able to finish in the month of April in the order in which I finished them. The first book that I finished was The Ships of Merior by Janny Wurtz. This is an adult epic and, by my definition, classic fantasy, and the second book in the Wars of Light and Shadow series. I read book 1, The Ships of Merior, a couple of months ago, and it was amazing. We're talking possible parallel worlds, possible time travel, mysterious races of creatures that have disappeared, or have they? A fellowship of magicians with very mysterious powers and very mysterious backstory, and with somewhat unclear motivations, medieval setting, insanely deep character development, moral dilemmas galore, so many great things, and this book made it so much better. Now, as I said before, this is sold as book 2 in the series, but it's technically only part 1 of book 2, because the way that the author wrote it, this one and The Host of Westmarch, which is book 3 in the series, are supposed to be one book, one full story arc. The publisher, however, decided to split them and sell them as 2 books, at least in Europe, and although their motivations were probably primarily financial, I think they did a good job, because even by itself, this is a fantastic story. I won't say too much about this book because spoilers, but I just want you to know that the author is so good with creating complex characters that I was able to empathize with every single person that we followed on page, every single one, even the ones that I ultimately dislike and I'm rooting against. She managed to write them so well that I was able to see everyone's reasoning and even kind of wish for their success, even while simultaneously wishing for them not to succeed, because that would mean hurting somebody else I really like. It's a uniquely frustrating reading experience, which I kind of enjoyed. And the author somehow managed to do all that without having to spell out anything on page. She put things there as they happened and then let you draw your own conclusions. I find that to be very impressive and sadly very rare in more recent publications. Needless to say, I gave the book 5 stars, and to give you a little bit of a spoiler, I am currently reading the next book in the series. As you can imagine, after all of this highly demanding epicness, I needed something relaxing and easy to digest, so this next book came up at the best moment, and that is The Hard Way by Lee Child. This is an adult military action thriller and the 10th book in the Jack Reacher series. I have spoken about this series at length before, and you're probably already familiar with it anyway, but in case you're one of the 5 people out there who aren't, we're following a tall, tough, ex-military dude who travels around the US and somehow always manages to find his way into a big mess, which he then proceeds to solve, mostly by out-badassing everybody else, and in the process usually shares the bed of a beautiful lady. Every book features kind of a villain of the day, easy to read, easy to digest, always a nice palate cleanser. Now, I'm gonna admit, Jack Reacher is so cool and indestructible that it's kind of ridiculous, verging on the caricature at times, and the dialogue can be a bit cheesy, but I don't mind a bit of cheese every now and then, and to compensate for that, the plot is always very well thought through, very interesting, very well structured. It was the same in this case, and I had so much fun reading it. As always, I gave the book 4 stars, 3.8 to be exact. The third book that I finished in April was Nemesis Games by James S.A. Corey. This is an adult space opera sci-fi and the 5th book in the Expanse series, and it was awesome. I read it within 2 days, and it's not a small book. It just kept on getting better the more I read. I can't say much about the plot, obviously, because book 5 in a series, but I'm just gonna say that this one was the best one in the series so far. It was fantastic. My entire review on Goodreads was nothing to add, no notes, the book was amazing. So I will keep it short and sweet here as well. Fast-paced, yet somehow contemplative. Love the character development, especially the backstory of one lady I had previously considered extremely bland. The authors actually managed to make her feel like a real human being, which obviously made her way more likable. I also really liked the unexpected combos between characters that they kind of paired up in this one. Worked really well. As I said before, it was awesome. I'm loving this series the more I read through it, and I really can't wait to see where it goes next. I gave the book 5 stars. The next book I finished was Red Country by Joe Abercrombie. This is an adult grimdark fantasy and the 5th book in the 6th book in the First Law World series. Even though it's technically a standalone, but please don't read the standalones from this world as standalones. Not that you won't enjoy them, but you'll miss so much. Anyway, I was told by a lot of people that this is the weakest standalone from the series and that I won't like it much, and all of those people were wrong. I still maintain that the weakest standalone was Best Served Cold, obviously a personal opinion, and I absolutely loved this one. I loved the characters that we followed, the messes that they got themselves into, the places that they went, the pieces of lore that we got, the setup for the Age of Madness that was done, and please, again, as I've said in previous videos, don't do what I did, which is read the Age of Madness before the standalones. You would enjoy the books from this series way better if you read them in publication order. Anyway, in this book we mainly follow a young woman whose younger brother and sister are kidnapped by an unknown group of people, and she goes on a quest to find them. In her travels, she's accompanied by an older gentleman who goes by the name Lamb and whose real name is never mentioned, though if you've read the First Law trilogy, you will recognize him within like 20 seconds. We also get treated to a few other articles of notorious human debris from previous books, as well as a few new stars, and I loved absolutely all of it. It's definitely not as good as the Heroes in my personal opinion, but it was still very fun to read, and I generally have nothing bad to say. Yet again, Joe Abercrombie was able to deliver a fantastic story written in one of the most beautiful and brutal ways, and I gave the book 5 stars. And the final book I read in April, and also the best book in the month of best books, is Shadow and Claw by Gene Wolfe. This is an adult sci-fi fantasy and kind of the epitome of the genre. It's also a bind-up of the first and second books from the Book of the New Sun series. Remember, like 5 minutes ago when I told you that one book nearly broke my brain? Well, here it is. This author, this world, this book and the ideas in it, all of it is orders of magnitude better than anything you will ever open in your entire life. Now granted, this all comes from my highly esteemed position of a rando on the internet who hasn't read most of the books you will ever open, and yet I am willing to stand behind that statement. Now, to properly describe my reading experience with this book, I will ask you to recall a childhood experience. Remember when you were a small kid and first learning to calculate, and maybe the first more abstract concepts of math, trying to break the barrier of immediate physical reality and wrap your innocent brain around something you can't relate any life experience to. Like, I remember learning about negative numbers and thinking to myself, but how can something be less than nothing? Or trigonometry, or God forbid, integral calculus? I'm not gonna talk about it because nobody needs to get depressed, all right? And reading this book, not only did I need to often go back and reread what I'd already read, but I also had to try and find a way to break the bounds of what this world has taught me thus far. I had to question every word that I read, even the very simple ones like dog, for example, and I can't tell you why right now because I want you to discover it for yourself, but it's safe to say it was a truly fascinating reading experience. And the world, oh my god, I don't want to tell you anything about it because I want you to go into it blind and be surprised by what you're gonna find in there. But if I can give you one completely useless description, reading this book, I felt just like I felt reading A Song of Ice and Fire for the first time 20 years ago. I felt this exact same obsessive desire to know more and to learn more and to see every little nook and cranny of this crazy world. But I will give you one advice. When you read the book, read all of it. I mean, every single thing that you find in there, read it, and that includes every poem and song and quote that is written somewhere outside of a chapter. Read those, as well as the appendices. I know that a lot of people don't read those in a lot of books, and I'm gonna admit I've done it, not read them in some other books, but here, please read them, I implore you. I read the first appendix, which is placed right after the end of The Shadow of the Torturer, right after I finished it, and it helped me significantly. It didn't change my entire perception of the book per se, but it shifted it slightly, just about enough to get all of my questions from the doubt category and put them in the wonder category. It managed to explain and justify the uncanny feeling that I had while reading some seemingly mundane parts of the book. Again, please do not skip anything. Everything in the book is a part of it. Honestly, it's such a fascinating work. It's not all good though. The writing is weird, at times in a good way and at times in a weird way. Which is a description I'm sure is very helpful to you. The structure of the story is also not usual. There's constant jumping around, interjections by the storyteller, omitted scenes. One particular example comes to mind where a significant portion of the story ends on a very, very big cliffhanger, and then next time we pick up, the entire scene and a big part of the circumstances have completely changed, and we are left to try and piece together what happened from randomly divulged scraps of information, and some things are never even explained. We have to entirely conjecture, or at least I didn't see explanation for them. So if you're not a fan of impersonating Einstein, trying to piece together the universe from a few scraps of supposedly confirmed knowledge, then this might not be for you. But oh, how I wish it would be for you. Another thing that I feel compelled to mention, not only because it made an impression on me, but because Heidi, one of my subscribers, who's always on point, also mentioned it as thing that bothered her.
And only during editing did I realize that I never really mentioned what was the thing. The thing was the treatment of women in this book and in this world in general.
And I can absolutely see why. It's mostly abhorrent, and if this is something that you're sensitive towards, maybe you should skip this one. However, I found it to be justified, and I don't mean that women, or anyone for that matter, should be treated that way. We can all agree on that. You don't need to pick the pitchforks just yet. but I found it made sense in the context of this world and the way that this story is told. And I will put a little spoiler tag on screen because I will talk about the nature of the world, so if you haven't read this book, please skip to this timestamp, I beg of you. Now, given that this world is actually Earth in the very unimaginably far future, where the sun is dying and where humanity, or at least the part of it that's left on Earth, has digressed to a state of absolute decay, both scientifically and societally, wouldn't it make sense that the treatment of certain groups of people who are weaker in a given capacity would also deteriorate to that extent? Wouldn't it actually feel uncanny if it hadn't? And yes, the author also divulges some semi-insulting contemplations on the nature of women and the nature of love for them, but he does so from the point of view of the main character. These aren't technically his thoughts, they are the thoughts of a torturer from a post-scientific, quasi-medieval society who's been raised by people who taught him that a man hurts what he loves, and I believe he says so almost verbatim somewhere in the book. As I said, everything in the book is a part of it. I myself had no issue detaching my personal views and simply observing the story as is without the need to have them affirmed. However, I can absolutely understand the terrible frustration that can be caused, especially in the moments while reading some of the more outrageously casual abuse, so I felt compelled to mention it, lest I lead you to a story you will hate. As I said, I enjoyed the book immensely. Frankly, I feel a sort of morbid fascination with this world. I think about it every single day, so predictably, I gave it 5 stars. So, to summarize, in April of 2025, I read 5 books, which amounted to a total of 2,803 pages. In terms of genre, I read 2 fantasies, 1 thriller, and 2 science fictions. In terms of formatting, I read 5 paperbacks, and in terms of sourcing, I owned all 5 of the books. So, this was April in books. I am in shock how good it turned out to be, even considering I had very high expectations. Can't say I've had a better one quality-wise, and I've had some really good ones. I am also really grateful for all of your kind comments under my last video. I really appreciate every single one, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to respond to all of you. You know why that was. But I am getting back to the groove, so I shall shortly be back to my usual rate of slow responding. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and that you had a beautiful April. Please let me know what was your favorite read of the month and or what was the most disappointing book of the month. I'm kind of curious to hear about that. Thank you so much for watching, and if you'd like to see some of my other reading wrap-ups and book reviews, check out this playlist. Bye!